Now, Occupy Wall Street began on Saturday, September 17th, but it's still going. Hundreds of people have spent 2 nights in Zuccotti Park, which they got permission to occupy and sleep in. And the area has been dubbed Liberty Plaza. They even got people from around the world to support the movement and donate $2,800 worth of pizza. But how long could it really last? And do we see this turnout as a disappointment or the beginning of something big? Here to discuss this with me is Kevin Zeese, a core organizer of October2011.org and co-director of It's Our Economy. Kevin, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, what do you say? I just asked the question, is this disappointing or is it the beginning of something big? I mean, the thing about this Occupy Wall Street protest is we heard so much about it from many of our fans, from people that follow us on Twitter. There really was a huge movement here if you talk about social media and online. You couldn't escape September 17th and Occupy Wall Street. And then at the end of the day, only about 1,000 people showed up.
The end of the day is not here yet. I mean, you know, even the largest tree comes from a small acorn. So I see growth as a real possibility. Their persistence will be key. This is a marathon, not a sprint. People need to keep at it and keep aggressively at it. They need to show through their own leadership that this can be done. If they can stay with it, I think they'll draw more people down there. I see this as a continuum of growth of protests. I've seen protests going on all over the country on all sorts of issues. Now the Wall Street, that's a first. Haven't seen Wall Street protests before. We have our event coming up in October, October2011.org on Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. beginning October 6th. We've already got thousands signed up for that. I went to some of the organizing meetings for the Wall Street event, and they had a hard time getting organized. It was announced by a magazine in Canada. No resources were given by the magazine. They spurred the activity. People came out and got excited. A core group has developed. Now they have to keep building. And I think they'll learn from this experience and keep building from it. They plan to be there for the next month. So it's time for people to come out and join them. I hope they do. There were 1.5 million tweets about this over the weekend, so there's a lot of attention given to it. The corporate media, of course, is not covering it or trying to cover it in ways that undermine it. And so I think that they have to stay with it. But I think this is the start of a step toward bigger protests in the future. As the economy continues to collapse, as people's social safety net continues to get cut, we're going to see more and more anger and I think more and more protests. I think October 2011 will be an even bigger event.
But so have we seen some type of fundamental shift? I mean, can you even tell me when we saw the last protest that had 1 million people, or that was that large? I mean, the last couple of years, there hasn't been anything like that. You could say that probably prior to the war in Iraq, we saw a really big uprising. But now, we don't see those same kinds of numbers. But is it because they're more frequent? They're smaller, like you said? We're seeing more of these protests, but they're smaller in numbers?
There are a lot of targeted protests around the country on everything from tuition hikes to mountaintop removal to climate change to Bradley Manning. There are protests all over the country on those issues. I think one of the big problems really is partisan politics in this country. A lot of Democrats are people who were the protesters. When a Democratic president came in, a lot of them didn't want to protest him. And I think that that's starting to wear off. People are starting to get tired of it. I think this Wall Street action, our October2011.org action, is another example of people finally getting over the Obama mystique and seeing the reality that he's not been much better than Bush on a lot of key issues. And so people are waking up again. They're starting to get active, starting to get mobilized. We've had an incredible reaction. Over 130 organizations have endorsed our action. People are just starting to promote it. We already have thousands of people signed on. We have a great online community going. People can sign up and participate in that. We plan to see this. We see this as a beginning. And I think that the Wall Street occupiers do as well. It's a beginning. It's a step toward a much bigger effort that's coming in the future.
But tell me this, too. I mean, what is the one single goal or the one single message of Occupy Wall Street or of October 2011? You know, a lot of people are saying that we need a Tahrir Square here in the U.S., but it's a little different, right? If you look at Egypt, if you look at Tunisia, you look at these places where there's revolutions. Now they're going through the really difficult part where they have to figure out what kind of government they want, how they want to rule. At the moment, they had one unifying factor, which is what they wanted the dictator out,
Mubarak, yes.
right? And then once you get past that first step, what's the unifying factor here aside from saying that Wall Street is corrupt and greedy?
Well, I think people see a corrupt government that doesn't work because of the money that's in government. So I think getting money out of government is kind of the thing that drives everything. A lot of folks are driven by the Afghanistan war. This is going into the 11th year of the Afghanistan war. I think if there's one demand that we'd love to see happen, would be people leaving us getting out of Afghanistan. But really the overarching demand is human needs come before corporate greed. And that's really what we need to see. We see the corporations getting wealthier, the wealth divide getting more extreme, the top 1% having wealth equal to the bottom 99%. That's what's got to change, is that wealth divide and that corporate greed. We got to start to satisfy human needs. And that's what October 6th is doing, by the way. It's the 11th anniversary of the Afghanistan war, 11th 11th year of the Afghanistan war starting, but it's also the first week of the new fiscal year for the federal budget, which will be an austerity budget for everything except for war. So environmental protection, job creation, sustainable environment, building a new energy economy, all that stuff's going to not face the funding it needs, while war, going into 11th year in Afghanistan, will get anything it wants, and that's the real problem. We have our priorities mixed up. The wealthy get their way, while the people are losing their social safety net.
All right, so inequality and priorities, I think those are definitely two good places to start. Now, you were down there on Saturday at Occupy Wall Street, and you checked it out. Who are the people that are there? I mean, are these young people?
Yes,
are they older people? Because the Tea Party, right, the thing that made them stand out is it was mostly middle-aged white males. Who do we see here?
Well, I guess I'm a middle-aged white male, and I was there. But anyway.
But overarchingly, that was the Tea Party.
Overarching, it was actually the people in their 20s in Wall Street. And I think what made the Tea Party famous was actually that their message was consistent with corporate power. They advocated less government, more corporate power, so the corporate media covered them. You see a demonstration of 25 Tea Parties, they get covered. You see 1,000 or more people on Wall Street, they don't get covered, except by RT and a few outlets. So I think a lot of what comes is just the magnification brought by corporate media. That's what makes the Tea Party bigger than it is. You look at polls, the Tea Party is not very popular. They're a tiny minority in the United States, yet they get this image of being this big majority.
Yet CNN teams up with them for a presidential debate.
It's absurd. That's the way it should. So I think that a lot of it's media emphasis, but this was a 20s event. I saw people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s there, so it's really bringing everybody together, but I think it was dominated and led by people in their 20s.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing right now is a lot of young people finally waking up. A lot of young people probably don't have jobs and that are disaffected, and we're seeing it in Spain and France as well. It's becoming worldwide. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks a lot.